We'll see if it's the end of Jim Harbaugh as a Michigan head coach. We've heard the reports. They've been widespread. John Bacon was the first one, I believe, to lay it all out there in regards to the options that Jim Harbaugh has on the table from the administration regarding contract extension, incentive-laden, lower base salary versus some NFL teams that are interested. Do you think it would be better for the football program to be done with Jim Harbaugh, start fresh, start anew, or bring him back and continue what he's built? And for those people that might chuckle, it is something that he's built in regards to a roster, a top 10 to 15 roster in the country.
Yeah, I think, well, the best thing they could do right now is do something before signing day, which is a week away from when we're talking right now. So basically, you know, you have some kids that are in limbo, and we know for a fact that Jim Harbaugh is telling recruits that he's, quote, 100% committed to being Michigan's coach and that he's going to sign a 3-year extension. At the same time, it makes you wonder why that hasn't been done yet. We had Ward Manuel, Michigan's athletic director, and Jim Harbaugh, along with some of the doctors, on that press conference I mentioned earlier. This was yesterday. And you know, inevitably, some of the questions turn to the future. You know, what are they going to do? Basically, why hasn't something been announced? They said they're going to talk after the season, and that, you know, they're counting the last game. They're hoping that they can play, even though it looks unlikely at this point, as the end of the season, which would be December 19th, and then they'll talk. Well, that's, you know, with the pushback schedule, that's 3-4 days after signing day that they would sit down and have that conversation. At the same time, it is reported. And you mentioned John U. Bacon, Chris Ballas, with us over at thewolverine.com, our senior editor, who was all over the story the first time that Jim Harbaugh chose Michigan and was the guy who was basically leading the charge with all the sources and the reports. He's doing the same thing this time around, and they've basically been hearing the same thing, that Jim Harbaugh's been operating the entire season as if the deal that they talked about before COVID hit, 3-year extension, was done. And that possibly now that they have had conversations, despite what Ward Manuel said, and that the deal isn't necessarily what it was, that it's more incentive laden, and that, you know, the base salary would be a little bit lower. But he's, you know, continued to tell recruits and people around him that he's going to be here. So that's kind of the reality of the situation right now. What I think, like I said, do something right away before signing day. You know, it seems like the majority of their class is going to stay intact. And even if he left and a kid signed, they'd let him out of the letter of intent, the way, you know, that things are going at this point. But what I think personally is, you know, I've told you this a number of times, and you know, I know we don't have the same viewers each and every time. So basically, I think that they, you know, should make some assistant coach moves and, you know, try to keep Jim Harbaugh. I'm somebody I'm 23 years old, and I've lived through a few coaching searches here at Michigan. Michigan's only had 20 head coaches, but they've had 4 here basically in my lifetime, and they haven't always gone so well. Even when a guy looks like a sure thing, or a guy looks like a Michigan man coming back, and, you know, Rich Rod was the hot name on the street, and he could have gone to Alabama possibly. You know, that was kind of the thing. And look where they would have been, I guess. But I've seen it go the wrong way. I've seen coaching searches, and so has Nebraska, so has, you know, Texas, where they wish they could have their old coaches back. Doesn't mean it's necessarily going to play out where Jim Harbaugh turns this around after a bad season, but I'd be willing to bet on him, I guess, over, you know, some of the other names out there, and we can talk about some of those. But that's just my personal feeling on it. And, you know, he's won 70% of his games. How attractive would this job be to a guy that is looking at it from the outside in, saying, well, this was a Michigan football legend, which Jim Harbaugh is. You know, was a Heisman Trophy finalist here, you know, beat Ohio State every time, won Big Ten championships, and then has done really well as the coach here, despite the lack of championships. They let him go. They let him walk, or he chose to leave, or they fired him. Man, what do I have to do? Obviously, you know, they want to beat Ohio State and win the Big Ten, but Ohio State's at a tough level right now where it doesn't look like they're going to slow down anytime soon. So doesn't excuse the lack of championships, but you look at what's best going forward. I would stick with Jim Harbaugh. I know a lot of people have that opinion. I know a lot of people have the opposite opinion. I respect all of it. And, you know, I would think that, you know, they all just want what's in the best interest of the program going forward. It's really up to opinion.
So Clayton, based on the information you just gave us and other sources, I think it sounds like it's about a 70, at least maybe an 80, 90% certainty that Jim Harbaugh is going to be back in 2021. We'll take the other side and say they can't work things out. There's a reason why it hasn't been announced for these number of days. They just can't come together and reach an agreement. He moves on. There are other coaching candidates, of course, out there. They got to fill the vacancy. We hear certain names on social media, but what are the real possibilities here?
Yeah, the first thing I'll start with kind of the Jim Harbaugh thing too, where I think this could play out, and I guess the scenario where he wouldn't return as Michigan's head coach. So Jim Harbaugh is a guy who, when he was in San Francisco, and it was basically clear that he wasn't going to return as their coach, he wouldn't really communicate with any other team or Michigan until the end of the season. That was kind of his line. Now there were people kind of, close to Jim that were talking to Michigan, and the Michigan athletic director, Jim Hackett, at the time, until, just before their final game. It was like, okay, let's do this. And it was basically wrapped up the Saturday night before their final game. So Jim Harbaugh is a guy that could take this thing until after the season. And if he truly is like, hey, I'm not talking about this until we're done, I'm focused on the team. He's always kind of been minded like that. And also here's, so then that would mean he comes back. Basically, it's like, all right, yeah, now I'm ready to discuss it. I'm ready to sign your deal. But if he's willing to do it right now, and he sees possibly the lower base salary, it says, you don't believe in me, I'll take my chance in the NFL, where I think he would get a job and has proven to do well there, then I think he would go. So the percentage-wise, I agree with you. It's about 70% he would return. But let's say he doesn't, like your original question stated. The names out there are Matt Campbell. There's a lot of people that you look around Michigan Twitter, they have their profile pictures set as Matt Campbell from Iowa State, who's done a solid job there. And then Luke Fickell, a guy who's an Ohio State guy, the head coach at Cincinnati, who's done a really, really good job in that conference and what he's been able to build there. Coincidentally enough, he's the one Ohio State coach in the last 15 years, when he was the interim there back in 2011, to lose to Michigan. So, you'd that would be the especially the thing that Ohio State fans would be selling, as soon as you hire him. But I think Matt Campbell would be the guy, and I think he would be interested in Michigan, interested in, a program, but you don't really know until, and even if there is some interest right now that he may be, showing behind the scenes, which I have no, evidence of, but it's certainly a possibility. You don't know until he signs on the dotted line either. So I think it's a risk to go and do another coaching search, which Michigan has seen 2 out of the last 3 really not play out the way they would have hoped it did. And even this one, with Jim Harbaugh, you certainly had higher hopes than what they've done in 6 years.
Clayton Sayfie, the Wolverine Mag on Rivals. Please join him, the rest of the staff there at Rivals covering Michigan athletics. Clayton, we appreciate you stopping by. The insight's phenomenal, and we'll see how this one plays out.
Can I plug something real quick, Mark? So if anyone wants to get the latest on what's going to happen with Jim Harbaugh and things like that, and what's going on, basically, we've had just about daily updates over at thewolverine.com with Chris Ballas, who I mentioned earlier, who's been all over the story. He's our senior editor. And you can use the promo code BLUE60 to get 2 months of that premium content for free. So even if you just want to get a little peek at what's going on and what we're hearing behind the scenes, they can take advantage of that. But yeah, I appreciate you having me on.